I sat at that table in the upscale steakhouse, surrounded by my husband Derek's coworkers, when Stephanie leaned forward in her designer dress and smirked at me. "How does it feel to be a loser? Your husband earns, and you just sit at home." The entire table erupted in laughter. Derek laughed too, looking away from me like I was someone he barely knew. Only I stayed silent, my face completely calm. I turned to Richard Ashford, the CEO seated at the head of the table. "How does it feel to know this loser owns 67% of your company?" The room went silent. Richard's face turned pale. The silence lasted maybe 3 seconds before Stephanie burst out laughing again, even harder this time. "Oh my God, she's delusional. Did you hear that? She thinks she owns the company." Others at the table joined in their laughter, echoing through the private dining room. Derek's face flushed red with embarrassment, and his hand shot under the table to grab my arm, his fingers digging into my skin. He leaned close and whispered harshly, "What the hell are you doing? Stop embarrassing me." "I need to tell you how I ended up in this nightmare. 5 years ago, I inherited a failing tech startup from my late father, Thomas Bennett. The company Apex Solutions was drowning in debt when he passed away from a sudden heart attack. I was 28 years old, barely out of grad school, and suddenly responsible for a sinking ship with 30 employees depending on me. I spent the next 3 years working 18-hour days, teaching myself advanced coding, pitching desperately to investors sleeping on the couch in my office, because going home felt like wasting time. I ate microwave meals at my desk and showered at the gym down the street. Slowly, painfully, I rebuilt everything from the ground up. I landed 3 major contracts. I streamlined our software architecture. I brought in revenue. By the time I turned 31, Apex Solutions was valued at $200 million and growing fast. I was exhausted, burned out, but proud. The company was mine, built on my sweat and tears and sleepless nights. Then I met Derek at a friend's wedding 2 years ago. He was charming in a way that made me feel seen for the first time in years. He worked as a mid-level marketing manager at a different firm, and he seemed genuinely interested in my work, my dreams, my exhaustion. He'd bring me coffee when I worked late. He'd rub my shoulders and tell me I was brilliant. I fell hard and fast. We got married within 8 months, a small ceremony, because I was too busy to plan anything elaborate. After the wedding, Derek changed. It was subtle at first. He started suggesting I hire him at Apex Solutions, saying his marketing expertise could help us scale faster. I made him director of client relations, thinking it would bring us closer, that we'd be building something together. But then he started pushing me to step back from the public face of the company. "Investors take businesses more seriously when there's a man at the front," he'd say. "You're exhausted anyway. Let me handle the external stuff while you focus on strategy from home." I was so tired, so burned out. I thought maybe he was right. Maybe I could work from home on long-term planning while he handled client dinners and board meetings. Slowly, I became invisible. People forgot I existed. Derek became the face of Apex Solutions, and I became the woman who used to run a company. Now back in that dining room, Richard Ashford stood up slowly. His initial shock transformed into something calculated, almost amused. "Paige, I think you're confused about the ownership structure. Perhaps we should discuss this privately." His tone was the kind you'd use with a confused child, dripping with condescension. Derek stood too, his jaw clenched, but his voice forced into calmness. "Honey, you're tired. You've been so stressed lately. Let's just go home and talk about this." He was treating me like I was having some kind of breakdown, and I realized with growing horror that everyone at the table believed him. Stephanie pulled out her phone, her eyes gleaming with malicious delight. "This is absolute gold. Wait until this gets around the office tomorrow." She started filming me. Within seconds, other people had their phones out, too, recording my humiliation, like I was some viral entertainment. My hands shook as I grabbed my phone and opened my email app. I pulled up the original incorporation documents, the ones with my signature clearly showing my ownership stake at 67%. I held the screen toward Richard. Look, right here. My name. My shares. Richard barely glanced at the phone. Those could be forged. Besides, ownership changed hands months ago through proper legal channels. Derek, I think you should really take your wife home. She clearly needs rest. His dismissal was absolute final. The table murmured in agreement. Someone whispered, "Poor Derek, having to deal with this." Another person said, "She seemed so normal." I felt the floor shifting beneath me, like the ground was opening up to swallow me whole. Something was very, very wrong, and I had no idea how deep it went. The drive home happened in complete silence. Derek gripped the steering wheel so hard his knuckles went white. I tried to access the company's legal portal on my phone, my fingers fumbling with the password I'd used 1,000 times. Access denied. I tried again. Still denied. "Derek, my login doesn't work." "What's happening?" My voice sounded strange, distant. He didn't answer, just kept driving through the Chicago streets past the familiar buildings that suddenly felt foreign. When we got home, he went straight to the kitchen and poured himself 3 fingers of whiskey, downing half of it in one swallow. "We need to talk," I said, my heart hammering. "Right now." "What's going on?" He whirled on me, the glass still in his hand. "What's going on? You embarrassed me. Do you have any idea how hard I've worked?" "Everyone at that company respects ME. I built those client relationships. I closed those deals. I'm the one they see every day, the one they trust. And you sit here playing on your laptop like you're still relevant, like you still matter." The cruelty in his voice stunned me. This wasn't the man I married. Or maybe it was, and I'd been too blind to see it. I ran to my home office, my pulse racing, and yanked open my laptop. I had backup files of everything stored locally and in the cloud. As I pulled up corporate filings from the Illinois Secretary of State website, my blood turned to ice in my veins. Documents had been filed over the past 8 months, showing a voluntary transfer of my shares to Derek. 67% of Apex Solutions transferred in stages. My signature was on every single form, but I never signed them. I would remember signing away my entire company. I would remember giving up everything I'd built. I printed them out with shaking hands and ran back to the living room, shoving the papers at Derek. "I never signed these. You forged my signature." His face showed no guilt, no remorse, nothing but cold calculation. "You were never going to let go, Paige." The company needed a real leader, someone with vision. "Richard and I are taking Apex Solutions to the Fortune 500. You were holding us back with your cautious approach, your resistance to aggressive expansion." "You forged my signature," I repeated, my voice breaking. "That's fraud. That's a crime." Derek set down his glass and looked at me like I was stupid. "Let me explain how this actually worked, since you seem confused. 6 months ago, Richard approached me. He'd done his research and realized you were the real power behind the company, but also that you'd become a ghost. He saw an opportunity. We came up with a plan." He paced as he talked, his words rehearsed like he'd been waiting to tell me this. "Remember when we refinanced the house? You signed a general power of attorney giving me authority to handle household financial matters. Richard's legal team got creative with that authority. They stretched it to cover corporate decisions. We buried the share transfer documents in a mountain of paperwork during that refinance. You signed the power of attorney, and we used that signature authority to legitimize transfers you never explicitly consented to. Technically legal, if you have the right lawyers arguing the interpretation." I felt like I was falling, tumbling through space with nothing to grab onto. That's insane. No court would accept that. Wanna bet Derek's smile was vicious. "Richard has the best corporate attorneys in Illinois on retainer. They'll drag you through court for 5, maybe 10 years. You'll look like a hysterical wife who can't handle her husband's success. By the time any judgment comes through, the company will have gone public, shares will be diluted into nothing, and you'll have spent every penny you have on legal fees. Or you can take the smart option." "What option?" I whispered. I'm offering you $2 million and this house. A clean divorce, a confidentiality agreement, and you walk away with your dignity intact. You can tell people we grew apart that you wanted to focus on other things. No scandal, no public battle, no humiliation. I tried to call my lawyer Marcus Patterson, the attorney, who'd handled my father's estate and helped me set up Apex Solutions. He didn't answer. I left 3 voicemails. I called the other board members' people. I'd trusted people who'd been there from the beginning. None of them returned my calls. Derek watched me spiraling with something like satisfaction. Oh, I should mention, Richard and I have been laying groundwork for weeks. Everyone who matters has already heard that you've been struggling with stress, maybe some mental health issues. Tonight's outburst just confirmed what they'd been told to expect. Then he delivered the final blow, the one that made my legs buckle. I'm filing for divorce tomorrow morning on grounds of your erratic behavior and mental instability. Stephanie and 4 other coworkers are prepared to testify about your bizarre outburst tonight. Richard will testify about your inability to fulfill your corporate duties, your paranoid accusations. You'll be lucky if a judge grants you supervised visitation if we ever have kids. He grabbed his overnight bag from the closet. I'm staying at the Hilton downtown. My lawyer will contact you tomorrow with the settlement offer. Think carefully about your response, Paige. This can go easy, or it can destroy you. Your choice. The door closed behind him, with a soft click that sounded like the end of everything. I stood in our living room, the home we'd chosen together, surrounded by furniture we'd picked out, and realized I'd been living with a stranger. A man who'd systematically dismantled my life while smiling at me over breakfast. I sank to the floor of my home office papers, scattered around me like evidence of my own stupidity. My company was gone. My marriage was a lie. My reputation was about to be shredded. And I had absolutely no idea how to fight back against an enemy who'd thought of everything. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Stephanie's mocking face, heard the laughter, felt Derek's hand digging into my arm. At 7 in the morning, I drove to Marcus Patterson's law office without calling first. His secretary, Brenda, a woman who'd always been kind to me, looked deeply uncomfortable when I walked through the door. Is Marcus available? It's urgent, I said. He's not available, Paige. I'm sorry. She wouldn't meet my eyes. I'll wait. I sat down in the lobby, ignoring her protests. I waited for 3 hours, watching lawyers come and go, watching Brenda's discomfort grow. Finally, around 10:30, Marcus emerged from his office, heading to lunch. He saw me, and his face went pale. 5 minutes, I said, standing up. That's all I need. He sighed and gestured to his office. Once the door closed, I laid out everything in a rush of words: the forged signatures, the conspiracy with Richard, the threatened divorce, the systematic isolation. Marcus listened while staring at his desk, his fingers drumming nervously. When I finished, he still wouldn't look at me. Paige, I can't take your case. What, Marcus? You've been my lawyer for 7 years. You knew my father. Richard Ashford's company throws enormous business to our firm. Millions in contracts every year for corporate compliance work, intellectual property issues, you name it. He called me last week. Marcus finally met my eyes, and I saw shame there, but also resolve. He said you were going through a difficult time, that you might reach out with some concerning accusations. He asked me to gently decline if you contacted me, said it would be a conflict of interest. Conflict of interest. I'm your client. Were. Past tense. Apex Solutions became a client when Derek brought us on for some contract reviews 6 months ago. That creates a conflict. I have to decline. He stood up, ending the conversation. I'm sorry, Paige. I really am. But I have a responsibility to my firm, to my partners. We can't afford to alienate a client like Richard Ashford. I spent the rest of that day calling every corporate litigation attorney in Chicago, 11 firms. Every single one gave me some version of the same answer they'd been retained by Richard's company for various consulting matters, creating a conflict of interest. Or they'd been warned that taking my case meant losing future business. I'd been systematically blackballed from legal representation. Desperate and angry, I drove to Apex Solutions headquarters, the gleaming downtown building I'd leased 3 years ago. I walked into the lobby like I still belonged there. The security guard, a man named Jerome, who I'd chatted with 100 times, stepped in front of me. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but your access has been revoked." "Jerome, it's me. Paige. I own this building. I own this company." My voice was rising, attracting attention from people crossing the lobby. "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to leave." He reached for his radio. "I'm not leaving. This is my company." I was shouting, now aware that people were stopping to stare, that phones were coming out. Someone was definitely filming. 2 more security guards appeared. The lobby filled with Apex Solutions employees, people I'd hired, people whose salaries I'd signed. They watched me like I was a stranger causing a scene. Whispers rippled through the crowd. Then Richard appeared with Derek right beside him, both men in expensive suits, both radiating authority and control. Richard spoke loudly enough for everyone to hear. "Paige, we're all very concerned about you. This obsession isn't healthy. Derek has told us about the struggles you've been having. Please, for your own well-being, get help. If you don't leave peacefully right now, I'll have no choice but to call the police for trespassing." "I'm not trespassing. I own 67% of this company." Richard pulled out his phone, and I heard him speaking calmly to a 911 dispatcher. Within 10 minutes, 2 Chicago police officers walked through the lobby doors. Richard, composed and professional, explained that I was a former employee having a mental health crisis, making false claims about ownership. He showed them corporate documents on his tablet, the forged transfer papers that looked completely legitimate. Derek played the concerned husband perfectly, his voice sad and worried. "She's been under psychiatric care." Derek lied smoothly. "This fixation on the company has gotten worse. I'm worried about her." The officers were kind but firm. "Ma'am, we need you to come with us outside. You can't be here if the property owners don't want you here." Property owners. I am the owner. But they were already guiding me toward the door, 1 officer on each side. I didn't resist because resisting would make everything worse, but the humiliation burned through me like acid. Outside on the sidewalk, 1 officer said gently, "Ma'am, is there someone we can call for you? A family member, a doctor." I shook my head, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. They let me go with a warning about trespassing. I sat in my car in the parking garage for an hour, crying so hard I couldn't see. By that evening, the security footage had spread across social media. Local tech blogs picked it up. "Delusional woman claims to own Apex Solutions removed by police." The comment section was brutal. People who'd never met me decided I was mentally ill, a gold digger, a pathetic hanger on trying to claim credit for my husband's success. Derek's friends and coworkers flooded the posts, painting me as someone who'd been jealous of his achievements for years. Someone who couldn't handle that he'd outgrown me. At 8 that night, someone rang my doorbell. A process server handed me divorce papers. Derek was seeking full ownership of our home, claiming he'd made the down payment using his own funds. He was requesting a restraining order, stating that I'd made threats against him and Richard. Everything was a lie, but lies backed by testimony from a dozen people, all telling the same coordinated story. I sat on my couch staring at the papers until after midnight. Then I remembered something. My father's old friend, Howard Walsh. He'd been a forensic accountant and document examiner before retiring. He lived up in Wisconsin, now near Lake Geneva, in some cabin by the water. My father had made Howard promise to watch over me, made him swear it on his deathbed. Howard owed nothing to Richard Ashford. He was my only hope. I threw some clothes in a bag and started driving north through the dark, empty highways, praying that Howard could help me find a way to prove the truth. I reached Howard's cabin around 3 in the morning. It was a small wooden structure set back from the lake, surrounded by pine trees that whispered in the night wind. I knocked on the door knowing I was being ridiculous, that he was probably asleep. But a light came on within seconds. Howard answered in a bathrobe, his white hair sticking up, but his eyes were sharp and alert. He took one look at my face and said, "Get inside, I'll make coffee." He was 73 years old, gruff, and no nonsense, with a mind like a steel trap. He'd been an expert witness in fraud cases for 30 years before retiring. I told him everything while he listened without interrupting, his weathered hands wrapped around a coffee mug. When I finished, he simply said, "Show me the documents." For 2 days I lived in Howard's guest room while he worked. He had equipment in his basement workshop that looked like something from a crime lab: microscopes, digital scanners, spectral analysis tools. He examined every document, taking measurements. I didn't understand running tests I couldn't follow. On the second evening, he called me down to his workshop. "Paige, these signatures are forged. Expertly done, probably by someone with access to your genuine signatures to practice copying your patterns, but forged nonetheless." Relief flooded through me so intensely I had to sit down. "You're sure? You can prove it?" "Under legal scrutiny, these won't hold up. Look here." He pulled up magnified images on his computer screen. "Your genuine signature has specific pressure patterns, microscopic hesitations at certain letter connections that come from muscle memory. These forgeries are smooth, too perfect. They were done slowly and carefully, not with the natural flow of your actual signing motion. The ink composition is also wrong for the dates claimed. Plus, I pulled metadata from the digital versions you provided. They show these documents were created months after the dates listed on them." Over the next several hours, Howard built an evidence package that was absolutely damning: notarized expert testimony, forensic reports, pressure pattern analysis, timeline inconsistencies, digital metadata, proving manipulation. We even found that on 2 dates, when documents were supposedly signed by me, my phone's location data showed I was in San Francisco for a tech conference nowhere near Chicago. "This is bulletproof," Howard said with satisfaction. "No honest court would accept those signatures as valid." The next morning, I drove back to Chicago with Howard's evidence package. I went straight to the Illinois State Attorney General's office and filed a criminal complaint for corporate fraud, identity theft, and forgery. The Assistant Attorney General, who met with me, a man named Philip Brooks, seemed genuinely interested. He reviewed the evidence for over an hour while I sat in his office, barely breathing. "This is compelling," he said finally. "We'll open an investigation. These are serious charges with strong evidence. Give me 2 weeks to build the case, interview witnesses, and coordinate with Corporate Fraud Division." For the first time in days, I felt hope. Real, genuine hope that the system might actually work, that justice might actually happen. Philip called me 3 times over the next week with updates. They were interviewing Richard's staff, reviewing corporate filings, bringing in their own forensic experts. Everything seemed to be moving in the right direction. Then the calls stopped, completely. I called Philip's office and got his secretary. "He's unavailable." I called again the next day. "He's in meetings." The day after that, "He'll call you back." He never called back. 2 weeks after my initial filing, I'd heard nothing. Desperate, I started staking out the restaurant near the Attorney General's office, where I'd heard Philip ate lunch. On the 3rd day, I saw him walk in. And 5 minutes later, Richard Ashford walked in behind him. I watched through the restaurant window as they sat together, laughing like old friends. Richard pulled an envelope from his jacket and slid it across the table. Philip glanced around, then pocketed it without opening it. They ordered drinks. They toasted. I took photos through the window, but I knew they wouldn't matter. Who would I show them to? Who would believe me? That night, I dug into Richard's background in ways I should have done months ago. What I found made everything make terrible sense. Richard Ashford wasn't just some CEO I'd hired. His family had deep roots in Illinois politics. His older brother, Thomas Ashford, was a state senator serving his third term. His uncle was a federal judge in the Northern District. His college roommate from Northwestern was the district attorney for Cook County. Richard had connections that reached into every level of Illinois government and law enforcement. I'd been fighting a rigged game from the start. The next morning, Philip Brooks finally called me. "Miss Bennett, I'd like to meet with you. I have news about your case." His voice was professional, almost warm. We met at a quiet coffee shop in Lincoln Park. Philip arrived exactly on time, carrying a leather briefcase. The moment we sat down, his demeanor changed completely. The warmth vanished, replaced by something cold and threatening. "Miss Bennett, you need to stop this campaign of harassment and defamation against Mr. Ashford immediately." I stared at him. "Harassment? I filed a legitimate criminal complaint with evidence. The evidence you submitted has been reviewed by our forensic experts. They disagree with your hired experts' findings. The signatures appear authentic to our analysts." He leaned forward. "What you're attempting here is serious. Mr. Ashford could sue you for defamation for millions of dollars. He could pursue criminal charges for filing false reports for corporate espionage, for attempted extortion." "Extortion. I'm trying to prove fraud." "Are you?" Philip's eyes were flat dead. "Or are you a bitter ex-wife trying to destroy your husband's career? That's what a jury will see. That's what everyone sees. Drop this. Accept the divorce settlement Derek offered. Move on with your life. If you continue down this path, there will be consequences. We could charge you with crimes. You could face jail time. Is that what you want?" I left that coffee shop feeling like I'd been punched in the stomach. The legal system wasn't going to help me. Law enforcement had been bought or intimidated. My own lawyer had betrayed me. Derek and Richard had thought of everything closed, every door blocked, every path to justice. I drove back to Howard's cabin because I had nowhere else to go, no one else to trust. He listened to everything, his face growing darker with anger. "They've rigged the whole system against you. This is corruption at multiple levels." So what do I do? I felt hollow, empty. If the courts won't help, if the police won't help, how do I fight back? Howard was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "You stop fighting their fight. You stop playing by their rules. You remember what your father taught you about building Apex solutions. When the system fails, you build your own leverage. You find their weaknesses. You become someone they can't ignore." He was right. I'd spent 2 weeks trying to work within a broken system. It was time to fight dirty, to use every tool I had, to become the kind of person I'd never wanted to be. Because Derek and Richard had taken everything from me, and if I didn't fight back with everything I had, they'd win completely. Back in Chicago, I remembered something I'd buried in the back of my mind. When I first built Apex Solutions' financial and data management systems, I'd created a failsafe, an emergency backdoor administrator account hidden deep in the system architecture. I'd designed it to protect against hostile takeovers or system lockouts, a ghost account that could access everything. Derek and Richard didn't know it existed. I'd never told anyone except my father, and he'd taken that secret to his grave. For 3 days, I barely slept. I locked myself in my home office and worked through the backdoor access. It took hours to navigate the security protocols without triggering alerts. But I designed those protocols myself. I knew every weakness, every blind spot. Once inside, I could see everything real. Financial records, internal email servers, corporate communications, wire transfer logs, vendor contracts. What I found was so much worse than simple theft. Richard and Derek hadn't just stolen my company. They'd been systematically embezzling from it. I traced the money through a maze of transactions, fake vendor contracts with shell companies, inflated consulting fees paid to entities that didn't exist, fraudulent expense reports in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. Over the past 6 months, they'd siphoned off almost $12 million, hiding it in offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands and Luxembourg. The company I'd built, the company I'd saved, was being gutted from the inside while they prepared to sell it or take it public. They weren't just thieves. They were parasites draining Apex Solutions dry. I downloaded everything emails where Richard and Derek discussed the embezzlement, openly believing their communications were secure. Wire transfer receipts, forged invoices, communications with other board members, showing how Richard had promised them massive bonuses if they supported him against any challenge from me. I had proof of a criminal conspiracy that went far beyond forged signatures. The evidence was overwhelming, damning, and completely illegal for me to possess. I'd hacked into the company's systems, but I was past caring about legal niceties. They'd destroyed my life. I'd return the favor. I set up a meeting with Catherine Reeves, a venture capitalist whose firm had invested $15 million in Apex Solutions 2 years ago. Catherine had no personal loyalty to Richard, only loyalty to her returns and her reputation. I met her at her downtown office, a sleek, modern space with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Lake Michigan. I showed her everything: the forensic evidence from Howard proving forgery, the embezzlement records I'd obtained through my backdoor access, the offshore accounts, the shell companies. Catherine's face went from skeptical to shocked to absolutely furious as she reviewed document after document. "If this gets out, my firm's reputation is destroyed," she said quietly. "We did due diligence on Richard Ashford. We vetted him. If we invested $15 million into a company run by criminals that makes us look incompetent at best, complicit at worst." "Help me," I said. "You have power, resources, connections that I don't have. Together, we can stop them." Catherine was silent for several minutes, her sharp mind clearly running calculations. Then she nodded. "I'm calling an emergency board meeting. We'll present all of this evidence. I'll have my lawyers there. We'll force Richard and Derek to resign immediately, restore your shares, and refer this entire mess to federal prosecutors who aren't in Richard's pocket. This ends now." For the first time in weeks, I felt like I might actually win. Catherine's law firm was massive, with connections that rivaled Richard's. Together, we spent the next day preparing a presentation that would destroy them completely. The board meeting was scheduled for 10 in the morning, 2 days away. That night, I went home exhausted but energized. I'd shower, sleep for a few hours, then wake up and finish preparing. Finally, I had a powerful ally and a real path to victory. I unlocked my front door and immediately knew something was wrong. The lights were on. I never left lights on. I stepped into the living room and froze. Derek sat on my couch with 2 men in business suits and a woman in medical scrubs. "Paige," he said softly, his voice dripping with fake concern. "We need to talk." The men stood up. "Miss Bennett, I'm Dr. Lawrence Grant, and this is my colleague, Dr. James Murphy. We're psychiatric crisis counselors. We're here to help you." "Help me!" I backed toward the door, but the woman in scrubs moved to block it. Derek stood slowly. "Paige, you've been making threats. You've been breaking into computer systems illegally. You've been following me, stalking Richard. You're clearly in crisis. These professionals are here to evaluate you and ensure you get the help you need." "I don't need help. I need you out of my house." Dr. Grant pulled a document from his briefcase. "We have an emergency psychiatric hold order signed by Judge Martin Reynolds. You're being taken for a 72-hour evaluation at Riverside Behavioral Health Center." "You can't do this." Panic flooded through me. I tried to push past them to the door, but Dr. Murphy, a large man, gently but firmly blocked my path. "We can do this the easy way or the hard way, Miss Bennett," he said calmly. "We have a court order. You're coming with us either voluntarily or involuntarily." Derek opened another folder showing them printed screenshots of my late-night emails to Howard, photos I'd taken of Philip and Richard at the restaurant, transcripts of my access to Apex Solutions systems that I didn't realize were being logged. "She's been obsessive, paranoid. She broke into the company's computer systems. She's stalking people. Multiple witnesses can testify to her erratic behavior. The woman in scrubs whose badge identified her as Nurse Angela Martinez took my arm gently. "Miss Bennett, this will be easier if you come willingly. We're not trying to hurt you. We're trying to help." I realized with absolute horror that they were going to take me, that Derek had outmaneuvered me again, that instead of presenting evidence at a board meeting tomorrow, I'd be locked in a psychiatric facility drugged, evaluated, and labeled as mentally unstable. Every word I said about the conspiracy would be evidence of my paranoia. Every document I'd gathered would be dismissed as the obsessions of a delusional woman. "No," I whispered. "Please, no." But they were already guiding me to a van parked outside. Dr. Grant had one arm, Nurse Martinez had the other. Dr. Murphy followed with paperwork. Derek watched from my doorway, his face a mask of false sympathy. The van drove through dark Chicago streets to Riverside Behavioral Health Center, a private facility in the suburbs. I was processed like a prisoner, my phone taken, my laptop confiscated, my belongings searched. They put me in a small room with a narrow bed and a window that didn't open. A doctor came in, asked me questions designed to make me sound crazy. When I tried to explain about the forgery, the embezzlement, the conspiracy, he nodded sympathetically and ordered medication. "This will help you rest," the nurse said, handing me pills. "I don't need medication. I need you to listen to me. I need you to call Catherine Reeves to call Howard Walsh. They'll confirm everything." "We'll look into that," the doctor said in a tone that meant he absolutely wouldn't. "For now, rest." They kept me under observation. Every protest I made was logged as evidence of my disturbed state. Every factual statement I tried to make was written down as a delusion. I was trapped in a nightmare where the truth made me look insane. On the second day, Derek visited. He sat across from me in the sterile visiting room, his face showing just the right amount of concern for any staff members watching. "You could have taken the $2 million, he said quietly. "You could have walked away clean. Now you'll walk away with nothing. By the time you get out of here, Catherine Reeves will have been dealt with. The board meeting will be canceled, and you'll have a formal psychiatric diagnosis on your medical record. No lawyer, no judge, no jury will ever believe you again." I stared at him, this man. I'd married this man I'd loved. "How did you become this person?" He shrugged. "I became someone who wins. You should try it sometime." Alone in that room after he left, I lay on the thin mattress and stared at the ceiling. I'd lost. They'd beaten me completely. Every move I made they'd countered. Every path I found they'd blocked. I was drugged, locked up, labeled as crazy, and completely powerless. But then I remembered something. Howard had copies of everything. Catherine knew the truth. The question was whether they could act before Derek and Richard destroyed all the evidence and solidified their control completely. I had to believe they could, because if they couldn't, I had nothing left to hope for. On the third day of my detention at Riverside Behavioral Health Center, a new doctor entered my room. She was younger than the others, maybe in her mid-30s, with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. Her badge read, "Dr. Sarah Hendricks." "Good morning, Paige. I'm Dr. Hendricks. I've been reviewing your case and I have to say something doesn't add up here." I sat up slowly, groggy from medication I didn't need. "What do you mean?" She sat down across from me, her posture open and non-combative. "I've seen coercive psychiatric holds before, usually in contentious divorces where one spouse wants leverage, or in corporate disputes where someone needs an opponent silenced. I've read the evidence your husband submitted. The screenshots, the testimony, everything." She paused. "This reads like someone conducting an investigation into fraud, not someone having a psychotic break." Hope sparked in my chest for the first time in days. "You believe me?" "I don't know what I believe yet, but I'm skeptical. Tell me everything, and I mean everything from the beginning." For an hour I talked. I told her about building Apex solutions, about Derek's betrayal, about the forged signatures, and the embezzlement, and the corrupt attorney general, and everything. I knew I sounded like a conspiracy theorist, like someone deep in paranoid delusions. But Dr. Hendricks listened without interrupting, taking notes, her face neutral. When I finished, she said, "You mentioned evidence. Forensic documents, financial records. Do you have someone on the outside who can verify all of this?" "Howard Walsh. He's in Wisconsin. He has everything." "Give me his number." I recited it from memory, and Dr. Hendricks, in an enormous breach of protocol, used her personal cell phone to call Howard right there in front of me. She put it on speaker. Howard answered on the second ring. "Who is this?" "Mr. Walsh, my name is Dr. Sarah Hendricks. I'm a psychiatrist at Riverside Behavioral Health Center. I have Paige Bennett here with me. She's told me quite a story, and I need you to verify some things." Howard's voice went hard and focused. "Is she okay? They had no right to put her in there." "That's what I'm trying to determine." "She mentioned forensic evidence of document forgery. Can you confirm that exists?" "Absolutely. I can send you encrypted files right now with my full expert analysis. Notarized, legally admissible, proving signature forgery beyond any doubt. I can also connect you with Catherine Reeves, a venture capitalist who has corroborating evidence of embezzlement." Dr. Hendricks gave Howard her personal email address. Within 5 minutes, files started arriving on her phone. She spent the next 2 hours reviewing them, while I waited, barely breathing. She called Catherine Reeves, who confirmed everything and threatened legal action against the facility for false imprisonment. Finally, Dr. Hendricks looked up at me. "Paige, I'm releasing you. This hold was inappropriate and possibly illegal." Just like that. "Not just like that. I'm calling my supervisor, and I'm threatening to go to the medical board about this facility accepting dubious psychiatric holds for what appears to be corporate maneuvering. I'm also suggesting that Catherine Reeves' lawyers might want to sue this facility for civil rights violations. Between those threats, they'll release you." It took another 6 hours of tense negotiations, threats, and legal posturing, but by late afternoon I walked out of Riverside Behavioral Health Center. I'd been inside for 4 days total. I was shaky from the unnecessary medications, exhausted but free. Catherine picked me up in her black Mercedes. "We have work to do," she said grimly, "and not much time." She'd moved fast while I was trapped. Using her investor rights in Apex Solutions, she'd called an emergency shareholder meeting that Richard and Derek couldn't block through standard legal channels. It was scheduled for 10 the next morning at her law firm's offices. The board had to attend. Richard and Derek had tried everything to stop it, but Catherine's attorneys had outmaneuvered them. That night, I showered for the first time in days, changed into clean clothes Catherine had brought, and joined her team at her firm. Catherine's lead attorney, a brilliant woman named Jessica Park, had organized everything: Howard's forensic evidence, the embezzlement records, proof of conspiracy testimony from Dr. Hendricks about the coercive psychiatric hold. We built a presentation that was devastating, irrefutable. "Tomorrow we destroy them," Catherine said. "We present this evidence. We force their resignations. We restore your ownership. And then we hand everything over to the FBI, because this level of fraud crosses state lines and involves wire transfers, making it federal jurisdiction. They can't corrupt federal investigators as easily as state-level ones." I barely slept that night, running through scenarios in my head, terrified that Derek and Richard would find one more way to escape justice. The next morning, we arrived at Catherine's law firm at 9:30. The conference room was massive, with a long mahogany table and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking downtown Chicago. The board members arrived looking confused and uncomfortable. Richard and Derek showed up at exactly 10, both flanked by their own attorneys. Richard's face was controlled, but I saw calculation in his eyes. Derek wouldn't look at me. Catherine stood at the head of the table. Thank you all for coming. We're here because serious allegations have been made regarding corporate fraud, embezzlement, and falsified ownership documents. I think everyone needs to see this evidence. She clicked a remote, and the screen behind her lit up with Howard's forensic analysis showing side-by-side comparisons of my genuine signatures versus the forged ones. The board members leaned forward shocked. Catherine methodically walked through everything. The microscopic analysis, the timeline inconsistencies, the metadata proving document manipulation. Then she moved to the embezzlement evidence. Wire, transfers to shell companies. Fake invoices, offshore accounts. $12 million stolen from the company. Board members' faces went from shocked to horrified. Several of them turned to stare at Richard with disgust. We were halfway through the presentation when Richard stood up abruptly. This is all very dramatic, but it's too late. Catherine paused. Excuse me. Richard pulled a document from his briefcase and slid it across the table to her. As of 8 this morning, Apex Solutions has been acquired by Tech Venture Global Corporation for $400 million. The deal closed at 7:53 this morning. I negotiated the sale using my authority as CEO. The company no longer exists as an independent entity. All shareholders will receive their pro rata distribution based on current ownership records. The room went silent. My heart stopped. Catherine grabbed the document and read through it, her face going pale. This is impossible, she said. You can't sell the company without board approval. I can in an emergency situation where the company's reputation is under threat, Richard said calmly. Your threatened presentation of false allegations created that emergency. I acted to protect shareholder value. The sale is complete. Tech Venture Global paid cash. The money has already been distributed to all shareholders of record based on the current ownership structure. Under that ownership structure, Derek owned 67%, Richard owned 20%, Catherine and the other investors owned 13%. I owned nothing. They'd just converted my stolen company into $400 million in cash, legitimizing the fraudulent ownership transfer in the process. No, I whispered. No. Even if I eventually proved the forgery, even if I won in court years from now, the company was gone, sold. Derek and Richard would have pocketed over $200 million combined, and getting that money back after they'd hidden it in offshore accounts and foreign trusts would be nearly impossible. They'd planned for this exact scenario their final escape hatch. Catherine was on her phone, her voice sharp and angry as she called lawyers, trying to find some way to unwind the sale to stop the distribution of funds. But Richard's attorneys were ready for every argument. Derek stood and walked around the table toward me. He stopped close enough that only I could hear him. I told you to take the $2 million. Now you get nothing. I'm leaving the country this afternoon. Richard is resigning from Tech Venture Global with a $50 million golden parachute already negotiated. Good luck trying to claw back money through international courts. You'll be 80 years old before you see a dime. He walked out. Richard gathered his things and followed, leaving behind a conference room full of stunned people and a presentation full of evidence that no longer mattered. I sat frozen, unable to process what had just happened. They'd won. Completely, utterly, devastatingly won. My company was gone. My money was gone. My future was gone. Catherine sat down next to me, her hand on my shoulder, but she had no words. What could she say? We'd been outplayed at every turn. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out numb. A text from an unknown number. You don't know me, but I know what Derek did to you. I was there. I have information that can help. Meet me, please. An address followed somewhere in Naperville, a suburb 30 minutes away. It's probably another trap, Catherine said when I showed her. I don't care anymore, I said. I have nothing left to lose. I drove to the address alone past suburban homes with perfect lawns to a small diner called Rosie's Family Restaurant. Inside, sitting in a corner booth, was the last person I expected to see, Stephanie, the woman who'd humiliated me at that company dinner, who'd laughed and called me a loser. I almost turned around and left, but she saw me and waved frantically. "Please, Paige. Please sit down. I know you have no reason to trust me, but please." Against my better judgment, I slid into the booth across from her. Up close, I saw that Stephanie looked terrible. Her eyes were red and swollen from crying. She'd lost weight. She looked haunted. "What do you want?" My voice was flat empty. "I'm so sorry." Tears started streaming down her face. "I'm so sorry for what I did to you at that dinner, for laughing, for humiliating you. I need to tell you the truth." "What truth?" She took a shaky breath. "For the past year, I've been having an affair with Derek. He pursued me, made me feel special, promised he was going to leave you for me. He said once everything was finalized with the company, he'd divorce you, and we'd be together. He promised me a vice president position at Apex Solutions, said we'd run it together." My stomach turned over, but I wasn't even surprised. Of course there was an affair. Of course. "After the sale went through yesterday, he cut me off completely," Stephanie continued. "Blocked my number, blocked me on everything. I went to his hotel and the front desk said he'd checked out. Then I started asking around, and I found out I wasn't the only one. He'd been sleeping with 3 other women at the company. Same promises to all of us. Same lies." "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I have evidence." She pulled a phone out of her purse. A second phone, I realized, one Derek didn't know about. "I recorded everything. I know it was wrong, but I was paranoid about being used, so I recorded our conversations. I have videos of Derek and Richard at my apartment planning the whole thing. They were drunk one night, celebrating, and they laid out everything, how they forged your signatures, how they bribed Philip Brooks, how they planned the psychiatric hold, how they set up the sale to Tech Venture Global months in advance as their exit strategy." She opened the phone and started playing a video. Derek's voice, slightly slurred from alcohol, filled the diner. "The brilliant part is the power of attorney from the house refinance. Paige signed it without reading it carefully, just trusted me. Richard's lawyers stretched that authority to cover corporate decisions. Technically legal if you argue creative interpretation, but she'll never be able to prove it was fraud because she did sign the POA." Richard's voice on the video. "And even if she somehow proves forgery, we've already planned the Tech Venture Global sale. We'll trigger it the moment she gets close to the truth, cash out and disappear. She can win in court all she wants. We'll be on a beach in the Cayman Islands with $300 million. The video went on and on. Derek bragging about manipulating me. Richard discussing bribing state officials. Both of them laughing about the psychiatric hold. Text messages between Derek and Stephanie where he explicitly discussed hiding money offshore, where he talked about plans to flee the country, where he admitted everything. "Why are you giving this to me?" I asked, my voice shaking. "Because he destroyed me too," Stephanie said, crying. "He made me betray you at that dinner, made me mock you publicly to establish distance between him and you in front of Richard. He used me. He threw me away like garbage. And I realized what I'd become, what I'd done to you. I can't take back laughing at you, but maybe I can help you get justice." I took her phone with trembling hands. "I need to make copies of everything. Can I keep this?" "It's yours. I downloaded everything to a hard drive too. It's in my car." I called Catherine immediately. She arrived within 20 minutes with Jessica Park, her lead attorney. They watched the videos and read the text messages, their expressions shifting from skeptical to shocked to grimly satisfied. "This is a federal case now," Jessica said. "Wire fraud, money laundering, racketeering, bribery of government officials. We bypass the corrupted state system entirely and go straight to the FBI." That afternoon, we walked into the Chicago FBI field office with Stephanie Howard, Dr. Hendricks, and Catherine. We presented everything: Howard's forensic evidence, the embezzlement records Dr. Hendrick's testimony about the coercive psychiatric hold, and now Stephanie's recordings where Derek and Richard explicitly confessed to everything. The FBI agents who reviewed our evidence spent 6 hours interviewing us. By evening, they'd opened a formal investigation. By the next morning, the investigation had expanded to include corruption charges against Philip Brooks and others in the state attorney general's office. 3 days later, FBI agents arrested Derek at O'Hare International Airport. He was in line for a flight to Grand Cayman, carrying 2 suitcases full of cash. They arrested Richard at his home in Winnetka while he was packing for his own escape. Both men were charged with 19 federal felonies, including wire fraud, money laundering, racketeering, identity theft, and conspiracy. The arrests made national news. The Chicago Tribune ran a front-page story about corporate fraud and corruption reaching into state government. I watched Derek's perp walk on television, saw him in handcuffs being led into federal court, and felt nothing. No satisfaction, no vindication, just exhaustion. With federal investigators involved, everything unraveled quickly. Philip Brooks resigned and was indicted for accepting bribes. Judge Martin Reynolds, who'd signed the psychiatric hold order, was investigated for corruption. The lawyers who'd helped forge documents turned on Richard to save themselves. Facing decades in federal prison, both Derek and Richard took plea deals. They agreed to return every dollar they'd stolen and cooperate fully with prosecutors in exchange for reduced sentences. Derek received 6 years in federal prison. Richard received 8 years. Neither would be eligible for early parole. The money came back slowly over weeks, as federal agents traced it through offshore accounts and shell companies. The sale to Tech Venture Global was unwound through complicated legal proceedings. The company was restructured, my ownership was officially restored, and I once again owned 67% of Apex Solutions. But I didn't want it anymore. The company had been contaminated by Derek and Richard's presence, tainted by betrayal. Instead, Catherine and I negotiated a new sale. Tech Venture Global still wanted the company, but at a revised price, reflecting its true value without the fraud. The new deal valued Apex Solutions at $600 million. My 67% stake netted me $402 million. The divorce from Derek was finalized quickly. He had no leverage anymore, no way to fight back from prison. I kept our house, received an additional settlement from his remaining assets, and walked away from the marriage with the understanding that I'd wasted 2 years on a man who'd never loved me, only what I could give him. With my future secure financially, I had to decide what to do next. I could retire, travel, disappear. But I kept thinking about how alone I'd felt, how the system had failed me at every level, how close I'd come to losing everything simply because I didn't know how to protect myself. I used $50 million to start a new company, Build Right Technologies. Its mission was simple: help small business owners and entrepreneurs protect themselves from fraud, teach them about proper corporate governance, provide them with resources and education to avoid what happened to me. I hired Dr. Sarah Hendricks as the company's employee wellness director. Her willingness to question the psychiatric hold to investigate, rather than assume, had saved me. I wanted her expertise in identifying coercive behavior and protecting vulnerable people. Howard Walsh became my chief security officer despite his age. He taught classes on forensic accounting and document security. He was the one person who'd never doubted me, who'd stood by me when everyone else had failed. And Stephanie became my executive assistant. She'd made terrible choices hurt me deeply, but she'd also found the courage to make things right when it mattered most. Everyone deserves a second chance. She worked tirelessly to rebuild her life and repair the damage she'd caused. She became one of my most loyal advocates. Catherine Reeves' venture capital firm received their proper payout from the sale, including interest and penalties. She invested $10 million in Build Right Technologies as a founding investor. We became genuine friends, 2 women who'd been through a war together and come out on the other side. 6 months after Derek and Richard's arrests, I stood in a hotel ballroom in downtown Chicago in front of 400 women entrepreneurs. I'd been asked to give the keynote speech at the Women in Business Summit. My book about the experience, titled The Invisible Owner, had been published the month before and was already on bestseller lists. I learned something profound through all of this. I told the audience, my voice steady and clear. People will try to take what's yours, your work, your dignity, your voice. They'll gaslight you, manipulate systems, even use love as a weapon. They'll make you doubt yourself, doubt reality, doubt your own memories. But the truth has power. Evidence has power. And refusing to disappear, refusing to be erased, that has power too. I paused, looking out at hundreds of faces, seeing my own fear and determination reflected back at me. I didn't win because I was smarter or richer or better connected than my adversaries. I won because I refused to stay silent, even when staying silent seemed easier. I won because I found people who believed in the truth more than they feared the consequences. And I won because I learned that justice isn't always immediate or easy, but it's worth fighting for. The applause was thunderous. After the speech, dozens of women came up to me with their own stories of betrayal, of stolen credit, of battles against systems designed to silence them. I listened to every story. I gave advice where I could. I connected people with resources. This was my new purpose. That afternoon, I drove to my father's grave at Graceland Cemetery. The autumn leaves were turning gold and red, falling gently across the headstones. I knelt next to his grave and placed fresh flowers on the stone. "I protected what you built, Dad," I said quietly. "It's mine again, truly mine this time, and I'm going to do good things with it. I'm going to help people the way I wish someone had helped me. I think you'd be proud." The wind rustled through the trees, and I chose to believe he heard me. My phone buzzed with messages, Catherine sending details about a new investment opportunity, Howard reminding me about a security training session for our clients, Stephanie confirming my schedule for next week's workshops. Life moved forward, busy and purposeful. I drove home to the house that was finally legally, irrevocably mine. That evening, I was hosting a small dinner party for the people who mattered: Howard, Catherine, Dr. Hendricks, Jessica Park, and a few others who'd stood by me. Not corporate contacts or fake allies, but genuine friends who'd proven themselves when it cost them something to do so. As I pulled into my driveway and saw the warm lights glowing in the windows, I felt something I hadn't felt in almost a year: peace. Real, deep, lasting peace. Not because everything was perfect, but because I'd fought for myself and won. Because I'd faced the worst betrayal imaginable and come out stronger on the other side. I wasn't the same woman who'd sat at that company dinner and been called a loser. That woman had been trusting, maybe too trusting. That woman had let others define her worth. This new version of me knew better. I'd been broken down, completely stripped of everything I thought defined me, and discovered that my real strength had nothing to do with money or ownership or recognition. My real strength was in refusing to accept injustice, in believing in truth even when the world called me crazy, in fighting back even when fighting seemed hopeless. Derek and Richard had tried to erase me, to make me invisible, to steal not just my company but my voice and identity. They'd failed. I was more visible now than ever, using my story to help others, to change systems, to make sure fewer people went through what I'd experienced. The pain had been real. The betrayal cut deeper than I'd imagined possible. There were still nights I woke up angry, remembering the laughter at that dinner table, remembering Derek's cold eyes when he admitted what he'd done. But on the other side of that suffering, I'd found something more valuable than any company or fortune I'd found myself. I'd found my voice, and I would never let anyone silence it again. As I walked into my house and heard laughter from my friends waiting in the kitchen, I smiled. This was my life now, built on truth and hard-won wisdom, and the knowledge that I was strong enough to survive anything. My story was far from over. In many ways, it was just beginning. But this chapter, the chapter of betrayal and survival was finally closed, and the next chapter would be written entirely on my own terms. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever had someone try to take credit for your work or diminish your accomplishments? How did you handle it? Drop your story in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, if it made you think about protecting yourself and standing up for what's yours, please hit that like button. Subscribe to this channel for more stories about resilience, justice, and fighting back against those who try to silence us. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it, someone who's fighting their own battle against betrayal. Your support helps these stories reach people who need them most. Thank you for listening to my journey. Remember, you are never as powerless as someone tries to make you feel. The truth matters, your voice matters, and you are stronger than you know. Until next time, stay strong, stay vigilant, and never let anyone make you invisible.